Peace, love, and Black Power family. Welcome to another episode of Get This Wisdom Live. I am your host, Shakti Sterner, and I decided to, just come on live. You know, it's quite early where I live. I'm in Detroit, Michigan. We're on Eastern Standard Time. That would make it uh, 5 o'clock in the rising, and I just feel compelled to speak and dialogue a little bit. I actually have a lot of energy. Um, so firstly, thank you for tuning in, and for those that will tune in later on, thank you for your time as well. And before I go any further, I must provide our disclaimer here at the platform. I do have two small children. They are, of course, here in my home, live on the scene. So you may hear them at any point in time during our dialogue. You may hear, my youngest child who has autism. You may hear her in the background beating on stuff, and all in the terms of her entertainment. You may hear my oldest daughter ask questions, and I might, I'm a mother first, so I may have to, while I'm talking, stop and answer a question. And, if it ever becomes a time when, motherly duties just absolutely call and one of my children are having an issue or whatever, I will either pause the broadcast and get that handled. And if it's something that, is going to be a little bit time consuming, then, I will, you know, exit the broadcast and recontinue when I am able to do so. So now we got that out of the way. Okay, so one of the first things I'm going to speak upon is the need for Sankofa. And what is Sankofa, you ask? Well, it's basically an African based term or from the Yoruba culture. I don't have the dialect. I wish I had it, but the Yoruba culture um, that basically entails that we return to the ways of our ancestors and ancestral lineage to see the blueprint that our ancestors laid for in order for us to advance individually and collectively as a people, you know, especially those of us misplaced here in Americas through the transatlantic slave trade. So, Sankofa, we understand what that terminology means and what we must do. We are currently in the Gregorian calendar year of 2023. We know that isn't fully accurate. However, we'll just keep it there for the purpose of this dialogue. And one thing about those of us here in America who have been striving to reconnect with our roots or learning our true ways of living, we have a lot of healing to do. And some of us are very well deep within that journey of healing. However, there are some people that are not, as advanced as others, and that's okay. We'll get there. Pardon me. So when we look at what has taken place in this society, and I've probably spoken upon this on different episodes and different conversations I've had with people personally, but let's create a vision, if you will. Let's take a deep look into what transpired here in the Americas back then, back in the 1800s, say 1700s, so forth, and what is currently still taking place now. So let's put ourselves in the mindset of, being back home in the motherland in Africa, where we were prosperous people, um, had our own healers, our own doctors, our own educators, our own scientists, our own engineers, our own mathematicians. We come from originally the roots of greatness. We used our hands for creating. We were, this is who we are as a people. So we go back before John Hawkins, came over and did what he did with his conglomerate of individuals at the time. We were thriving, we had our own financial system in place, our own ways of conducting business and commerce, our own currencies. We were the original people and the most royal and the most wealthy people out of all the people walking this planet. That makes me think of Mansa Musa, and and him being the wealthiest man in the world at the time in the terms of gold. That makes me think of Imhotep, one of the first doctors. Um, Slavery, or what is presented to be slavery, was not the starting point of our story. It more so interrupted the greatness that we have as a people, you know. And even going further back, with the creation of the European. The European was not one of the original people that walked the face of this planet. Um, the European came into existence with genetic graphing and genetic devolution, right? Or de-evolution, whichever way you prefer to pronounce that word. So when we look at the origins of this white person and their beginning of existence, we as original people did have our hand in that creation process. And furthermore, we know that the Caucasians are come from where? The Caucasus Mountain. So uh when they finally traveled about the mountains, and I'm just giving you a brief overview here. I'm not going into full detail, but when they came out of the mountains and you know became acclimated or introduced to society, they were completely savage. They were cave beasts. They had no sense of human humanity. They did not know. So, there were a group of us, that decided for whatever reason that these Tamahus and these Yurugu needed to be educated. So that's when those who are known as the Moors come into play, and definitely educated the Caucasian European caveman on how to, you know, conduct himself as a human, how to clean himself up and live a civilized life, bathing, how to clean themselves, clothing, how to dress in an appropriate manner, and so many other things. And while we're teaching them, how to be civilized people, and also sharing with them certain knowledge that we have, you had some of those who took that knowledge and they ran with it. They used it against us. And, and that's unfortunate because it's still very present today. Our technology, our science, our mathematics, our whatever, everything outside of the English language, because the English language itself is bastardized. That is not our original tongue. That is not our original dialect. We have been taught a very bastardized and low vibrational language that does not belong to us. So, and before I move forward, let me add on to that real quick. If you think about those of our people who are still in Africa and certain native tongues, um, and even the Arabics, the pale face Arabics do this. If you think about their languages, and we're not talking about the English language that some of them speak due to colonization, nor the French language that some of our people speak. I'm speaking upon the different dialects and tongues. If you can, you think about it, you hear a very um very what's the word I'm looking for? Very pronounced uh rhythmic tone within their speech. Even some you hear they do the, or they're when they're speaking, it sounds like they're singing. They have some melody towards the speech pattern. That is a part of the vibrational power that we once spoke with. And coming here, let's get back to where we were. So we had all of this greatness going on, and we helped bring into existence the Caucasian white man. We taught him how to live a righteous life, and no longer be savage, and things of that nature. So got to the point where that same Caucasian that we thought to educate started to use our own knowledge, wisdom, and understanding against us. And we fell victim to that as a people. We got manipulated with the promise of more gold. We definitely got manipulated. So we get brought over here. Now there are a lot of different conversations at play about uh, the validity of us coming here. However, um, just speaking upon the facts and evidence that we have, you know, there are definitely some of us that have direct native connections to the motherland. I am, partially Nigerian, and that's something I've been able to prove through genetic research. But anyway, so we get over here, and you know, as I said before, completely foreign land, completely foreign way of life, completely foreign languages, concepts, everything completely foreign. We didn't even know how to read this language, right? So we were at um, a complete loss when we got here. We were definitely confused. We're in a completely foreign land with completely foreign concepts that we've never been introduced to before in that way. And we are told that we have to do this work on these slave fields or we're going to die. We have to obey our worldly and earthly masters as we would, you know, the Messiah. This is in the Bible. These are Bible verses. This is stuff that some people study and think that it's the supreme doctrine on how to live life in a religious manner. However, what is known as the current Bible, the King James Version, that is not the original Bible at all. And we know that King James was a homosexual man who also has um a a book called Demonology. So take that and do with that what you will. So we have these pale faced, stringy haired, blue eyed people all in our face, threatening us, giving false promises. We'll give you freedom at this age, blah 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 blah. All these lies, right? They're beating us with whatever they whips, chains. A lot of our people in chains, and whew, our men being beaten, raped, hung, lynched in front of the whole crowd to instill fear. Our little innocent babies, little innocent, angelic, divine babies being taken directly from the mother's womb and being sold onto other plantations for their future labor. We go through all this for centuries, and we begin to adapt because we don't know, know other anything other than this, other than what we were getting back home. We believe these white people when they tell us they could show us the way to freedom and to a better life through the religion that they present to us, the doctrine they present to us, the doctrine that was written by them, knowing that we can't read and we won't be able to really tell what that book is really saying anyway. For the exception of few, as the movie presented, Nat Turner was one of those people that could decipher and read English, and he was able to present that information as a minister. So you had your ministers who could read because they were the ones that were, giving the so-called word to the Negro, the so-called Negro. The rest of us couldn't read, so we just had to take that on face value. And then we're being presented with this picture of this white, pale-faced man with stringy hair and blue eyes, and being told that that's our Messiah, when even in the Bible that they wrote, that they manipulated, it clearly describes that whomever the Messiah is has hair of wool and feet of bronze. So this is the beginning of the subconscious programming. So we get this. We're in these tumultuous times, slaving away on the field in 100-degree plus weather. Uh, no adequate clothing, no adequate shoes on our feet, walking barefoot, no adequate medical care, barely eating, growing these crops and tending to these crops for these lazy European. So, eventually discussions start being had, you know, for those born into the slave life, and they're they're tired of it. They're having discussions amongst themselves in private, um, discussing their potential freedom, which may or may not ever come. Those of them getting so tired that they're willing to die for it, and the others are so afraid to leave their slave master and have grown comfortable in that mindset that they stay. It gets to a point where you know some of them start escaping, and I will state that there were already free blacks that were never a part of that slavery, so we'll speak on that. But for those that were, some of them got real courageous and started to fight back, started to become quote unquote rebellious, right? You had some that ran away. They escaped slavery and ran to the north, the northern states, the Phillies, the Michigans, Underground Railroad. And you had some that stayed, didn't want to leave. And then you had some that decided to fight right there on that field and accept whatever fate comes along with that. That again brings me to Nat Turner and the regime he led amongst the the colonizers, you know, freedom or death, right? So it finally gets to the point where there's a lot of blacks, free blacks that have escaped slavery, blah blah blah. And then it comes to a point of discussion between the North and the South. And let's be very clear about this right here. When we look at the terms of the Civil War that was fought between the North and the South, it was never fought in the best interests of those of African descent like it was presented to be. That was never the case. It was all about money and capitalism. You know, people were losing money, people were upset. So that's how that war actually began. It was never about actually freeing the so-called slaves. It was all about money. So they go to war, X, Y, and Z, fight, 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 fight. South gets defeated. So now it's only it's decided that those of African descent become free men and free women from that physical aspect of slavery, and at least the physical, very underpaid or very low paid form of slavery. So we's free now. We got us free, right? We still trying to figure out, based off of the skill sets and the techniques that we gained during those slavery days, to become, self-reliant. So that's when, sharecropping comes into discussion and things of that nature, right? So we're gonna fast up a couple decades. I mean, a couple centuries. So finally, the African American, and I don't like saying that, but it is what it is. The African person of descent is so called free, able to do what others do, which is still not the case, because even after that happened, there were still Jim Crow laws, uh, segregation. Although, in my opinion, segregation was was when we were most successful, at least as it pertains to this landmass. Um, we had to depend on ourselves, so we didn't really have any other choice. But you know, going into all that in civil rights, quote unquote, the Martin Luther Kings, the Rosa Parks, so on and so forth. The whole civil rights thing became a topic of discussion, and unfortunately, that was more so to our demise, a pacification, so that we would still, be comfortable enough in our mental and emotional and spiritual enslavement that we would still go be slaves in this corporation and this system of white supremacy, still build their corporations, still do all their hard labor with little to no pay. We still wanted, the rights of others, and being able to vote, and being able to use the same bathrooms, and so on and so forth. So we know all that. So we start believing in the whole integration thing, and we're thinking that we're finally being viewed as humans, when the three-fifths clause in the Constitution definitely tells us that that's still not the case. But we want to be on the same level as everyone else so bad, and we get these false promises through integration. But that was, again, a pacification, so that we wouldn't, you know, get so fed up with our ill and improper treatment that we would take another course of action. That whole false illusion of inclusion through integration did nothing more. We're going to give you a little piece of this. you know you could come on and vote now. You can do this and that and the third, but it was still never an equal playing field, because let's face it, those with white skin were born with silver spoons in their mouths. Even the poor whites who have somehow fumbled their white privilege, they were still, they were born with generations of money because of what their ancestors stole from us. We, on the other hand, are just begging for scraps and being okay with the scraps we were given, just like back on the slave field when they would give us the scraps of that hog and that swine. So, you know, people are looking at it like small victories. We're on our way. Racism is leaving. It's not being real anymore. When it never stopped. Just like slavery. Never stopped. Um, we look at the current state of the black family and the black man, black woman, and the black child. The black man has been severely beaten with many stripes, physically, mentally, emotionally. He goes out into the black community basically desperate with his back against the wall because he feels as though he has no true way to provide for himself and his family. So he goes out into the community desperate and taking that desperation out on the next man who looks like him, who's pretty much in the same position that he's in. We look at the current state of the black woman who has um, her own traumas that she's been dealing with due to this system, and her, even now when the civil rights movement came in with the welfare and the things of that nature, promising more government support, but the man could not be present. And that's a whole different, topic of discussion with the the purposeful implementation of the jail system, the new penal system where men are being unfairly housed for, you know, a lot of them unfair charges for crimes that if another person of another race would have done the same thing, they more than likely would just got slapped on the wrist and said they are suffering from mental illness. And that goes into the black man being desperate, going out into the community and hurting his own people because he feels like he has no other options. So the black woman being involved in that, she was once again separated from her black man, just like on a slave field. But in this time, with the false promise of welfare, food stamps, things of that nature, black women started to, to develop the mindset, well, I'm doing it by myself anyway. I don't need you. And the world tells me that you're weak, so I'm gonna believe what the world say. And you are weak, and you're nothing. You're not needed. And mind you, this concept of independent woman and black feminism started back in slavery as well, when the white woman, needed the black woman for the numbers for their agenda. They were upset that their man, their white man, was getting all of the power over the slaves and the finances, and they were getting little to nothing in crumbs. And also dealing with the fact that the white slave master would go find little slave girls and rape them and have sex with them. So the white woman became the most evil, vile thing on this planet, and she manipulated black women into joining her cause to destroy the black family structure. And that's still, very, very present today. We have a lot of destruction in the black family structure in a home. And it's been a degradation process throughout the centuries. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. And then you see all these other uh, forms of attack taking place in this psychological and spiritual warfare. The so-called rise of the LBGTQ community. I was invited to a dialogue with uh, a individual who I will not refer to as a woman nor transgender. I don't relate to those ideals. For me, a man is a man. He's born with XY. No matter what surgery you get, you cannot change your chromosomes. XY is what you are, or XX if you're a woman trying to be a man. So we have that attack that is very, 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 very strong and powerful, as that movement is a movement now of people who have a different sexual preference. It's become a social and political movement. And it definitely, doesn't do any good for the advancement of the black community and the black children overall. So we deal with that that particular point of attack. We deal with the religious aspect, which keeps a lot of people separate because they are so emotionally attached to their religion that they're willing to judge the next person, and all types of things. We have that, the LBGTQ. We have the religion. We have the education system, which is completely biased, especially when you are in the inner cities. The refunding, the funding that is made available to the public school system is either misallocated, misappropriated, or just embezzled. So we have the lack of proper and accurate education, the lack of proper, even now still, it's nothing new under the sun. A lot of these things, like even now, lack of proper education, we weren't allowed to read English back then. The lack of proper health care, we were having children in the cold slave sheds back then. So it's so many different forms of attack, and then we go into this whole agenda that's being pushed by media and other sources of such, that black men and black women hate each other. That is done purposely because when we were one, moving as a unit in unison and performing our duties to the best of our ability for our family, we were successful in that way. To separate the man and the woman is to separate the true power, the true foundation of power. So we have that going on, the purposeful separation and the purposeful concept of gender wars. And then we have the children who are, you know while all these things are going on to in the world, society, the adults in their family, we have these precious little boys and girls who are basically left to fend for themselves on a mental and emotional level. We stick them into the public school system and tell them they just got to shut up and learn. But are we as parents even going into the school systems to see what the curriculum is being taught, and giving our suggestion on which way they reinforce the education that the children are supposed to be received at home? We're not doing any of that in that realm of accountability, even for those who have to utilize the public school system. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some parents that are on top of their jobs, regardless to what they're going through on a more personal level. When it comes to their children, they are definitely trying their hardest, and I commend those parents for that. But you know, the attack, and that public school system, whether we're ignorant to it or not, is an introduction to a lot of the agendas that are present in our community and destroying our community, and putting it in the public school with small children whose minds are still very easily impressionable. It's just providing, the first layer of attack and destruction to the youth and to the future. So I say all that to say we have to revisit the concept of Sankofa, which means to go back and get it. We have to reintroduce ourselves to the ways of living that had our people most successful in advancing and being more self-reliant on ourselves and believing in ourselves and knowing our power and knowing what we're capable of doing. We built all of this. All of this here in America was built because of us, our people. Our people put that sweat in. Our people bled for this. Our people lost their lives, lost their children, family members. We did this. We're that powerful of a people that we can create all this for them. Well, we can create this for ourselves too. They just don't want us to do that because then we become completely independent off of their system that we're building for them and become self-reliant and interdependent upon each other again. So we have to really, and those of us that know better, us conscious folk, we have to do better. We have to stop getting involved or getting trapped emotionally and triggered into the matrix and what society wants. We have to be mentally um, strong enough and have that mental endurance enough to not get sucked in and but be the leaders and the examples to our people of what it looks like to return to your ways of your ancestors and embody that royalty and that wisdom and being the example of how that type of righteous lifestyle can be firstly possible, achievable, but something that is going to be, very beneficial to not only ourselves who are still here, but our generations to come, So, with that being said, I'm pretty much done with the ranting, even though I hope I made some sense here. And, if you have something to add on, please leave it in the comment section. Any questions, and if you need to get in touch with me directly, you know, I do offer coaching, spiritual counseling, and so many different things. If you need to get in touch with me, you can reach out to Shakti Sterner, SHAKTI STERNER at gmail.com, and I will get back with you in a timely manner. We do, I'm homeschooling mama, so most of my time is devoted to the children, but I do go live when I'm able to do so. We do have a very special episode coming up this month. We have Baba Baruti coming on, who's a very, 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 very well respected elder in the African centered community. He's a independent educator, has been Baba to many, and definitely someone who I'm excited to have this dialogue with. And I'm also excited to present this information on to you. So, with that being said, and also keep a look on my Facebook page. We are planning something very big coming up for the youth, the children who are being schooled and educated independently or homeschooled and receiving culture-based education. We do have something very special coming up for them in next year, but we are working on producing and putting all the elements together now. And with that being said, I'm going to thank you so much for tuning in this morning. And again, for those of you who tune in at a later time, thank you so much for your support. And I'm going to say this on behalf of my family to yours, thank you so much for listening. And tune in this evening. We have a double header going on. Mama Sharice Reed L, or affectionately known as Mama Cherie from Reed's Learning Street, will be on with us to have more of a dialogue into this, but in a different way. But it's all in cohesion. So thank you again. Talk to you soon. Peace.